So I'm casually browsing Aliyah information online, in that maybe someday way that people research exotic vacation destinations they'll never actually visit, when I come across this terrifying piece of information. The grandparent pathway for Aliyah might be eliminated. Eliminated, like completely removed from existence, as if my Jewish great-grandmother Rivka never existed and her Jewishness has an expiration date. Suddenly, what was a vague, maybe I'll move to Israel when I retire dream has become a full-blown emergency. It's like finding out your favorite restaurant is closing permanently, except instead of losing access to good hummus, I'm about to lose access to an entire country. I'm having an existential crisis about citizenship rights I didn't even know I wanted until someone threatened to take them away. So I call my dad in a panic. Dad, do we have documentation proving that great-grandma Rivka was Jewish? And he goes, of course she was Jewish. She made the best gefilte fish in Brooklyn and complained about everything for 93 years. What more proof do you need? But apparently, the state of Israel requires slightly more evidence than culinary skills and a talent for kvetching. This is when I discover that proving someone else's Jewishness from 1920 is like being a detective in a very boring crime drama where the only mystery is whether your great-grandmother kept her synagogue membership receipts. I'm basically trying to solve the case of who was Jewish enough to make me Israeli eligible, and all the witnesses are dead. Most of the evidence is in Yiddish, and the statute of limitations is apparently running out due to political developments I have no control over. My mom finds me at 2 a.m., surrounded by genealogy websites and yellowed family photos, muttering about Ellis Island records. "What are you doing?" she asks. "I'm racing against Israeli political developments to prove that great-grandma Rivka was authentically Jewish before the Knesset changes the law," I tell her. She backs away slowly, probably wondering if this is some sort of very specific nervous breakdown. The urgency is absolutely mental. It's like being told you have 6 months to complete a PhD dissertation on your own family history. Except your thesis is why my great-grandmother's Jewishness should grant me citizenship rights, and your primary sources are a box of old photographs and Uncle Morris's unreliable memory. I've gone from being a normal person to someone who checks Israeli political news daily like I'm tracking stock prices. I start calling elderly relatives, asking if they remember anything about great-grandma Rivka's Jewish credentials. My 89-year-old great-aunt Sarah listens to my frantic questioning and goes, "David, darling, of course Rivka was Jewish. She lit candles every Friday, kept kosher until the day she died, and never let anyone forget that her family fled the Cossacks. What more do you want? A signed affidavit from the Rabbi of Minsk." But that's exactly what I want. I want signed affidavits from everyone. I want documentation. I want proof that would hold up in the International Court of Jewish Genealogy, because apparently family stories about fleeing Cossacks aren't sufficient evidence for modern Israeli bureaucracy, even though they should be. The genealogical research is like the world's most stressful scavenger hunt. I'm searching through Ellis Island records, trying to decipher handwriting from 1923 that looks like someone sneezed on a typewriter. I'm looking for synagogue membership records from Brooklyn synagogues that probably closed decades ago. I'm basically trying to reconstruct my great-grandmother's entire Jewish identity from scattered digital breadcrumbs and family folklore. My wife finds this whole situation hilarious. "So you're panicking about losing the right to move to a country you've never seriously considered moving to based on the Jewishness of a woman you met twice when you were 5. And when she puts it like that, it does sound completely mental. But yes, that's exactly what I'm doing. I'm having a crisis about theoretical future immigration rights based on inherited religious credentials from someone I barely remember. The political aspect makes it even more surreal. I'm checking Israeli news like I'm following a sports team, except instead of waiting to see if they'll win the championship, I'm waiting to see if they'll eliminate my eligibility for citizenship. Breaking news. Knesset committee discusses law of return amendments. Dave's great-grandmother's Jewishness may become irrelevant for immigration purposes. I'm explaining this to my friend Rachel, and she goes, "So you're worried that Israeli politicians might decide your great-grandmother wasn't Jewish enough to make you Israeli enough?" And that's exactly it. I'm at the mercy of political developments in a country I don't live in regarding the religious credentials of a woman who died before I could properly interview her about her synagogue attendance records. The documentation requirements are mental. They want proof that great-grandma Rivka was Jewish, which means I need her documentation. But she immigrated in 1923 when record-keeping was apparently optional. So I'm trying to prove someone's religious identity from an era when the most sophisticated documentation was a handwritten entry in a ship's manifest that may or may not spell her name correctly. I call the Jewish Genealogical Society, and the researcher listens to my panicked rambling and calmly explains that yes, this is normal, and yes, people are rushing to complete grandparent-based applications before potential law changes. I'm not alone in my genealogical panic. There's apparently an entire community of people frantically researching their great-grandparents' Jewish credentials, like we're all studying for the same very specific final exam. But the absolute best part is when I realize that even if I successfully prove great-grandma Rivka was Jewish enough to qualify me for Aliyah, I'll arrive in Israel as someone who's Israeli enough to vote, but potentially not Jewish enough to get married in a synagogue. It's like winning the lottery, except the prize is access to a country where you're simultaneously welcome and not quite welcome enough. The timeline pressure is killing me. Every day I spend trying to locate synagogue records from 1920s Brooklyn is a day closer to potential legislative changes that could eliminate this pathway entirely. I'm basically in a race against Israeli politics, which feels like trying to outrun a very slow but very determined bureaucratic tsunami. My dad listens to my increasingly frantic updates about genealogical research and political developments and finally says, "David, if you put half this energy into your actual job, you'd be CEO by now." And he's right. I've become more invested in proving my great-grandmother's Jewishness than I am in most aspects of my current life. The family coordination aspect is particularly fun. I'm calling cousins I haven't spoken to in years, asking if they want to join me in a frantic application to Israeli citizenship based on our shared great-grandmother. "Hi, Cousin Jennifer. I know we haven't talked since Uncle Bob's funeral, but want to become Israeli citizens together before the law changes?" Yeah, I know it sounds mental, but hear me out. Some cousins are interested. Others think I've completely lost my mind. But there's something weirdly bonding about collectively panicking over shared genealogical research. We've created a family WhatsApp group dedicated to tracking down great-grandma Rivka's Jewish documentation. It's like a very niche support group. Grandchildren of potentially insufficiently documented Jewish immigrants anonymous. The professional genealogical researcher I hire listens to my requirements and nods knowingly. Ah, yes, the law of return panic research. Very popular this year. Very popular. I'm part of a trend. There are enough people frantically researching their grandparents' Jewish credentials to constitute a recognizable genealogical emergency category. But there's something oddly satisfying about diving deep into family history under pressure. I'm learning more about great-grandma Rivka's life than I ever knew when she was alive. I'm discovering synagogue records, immigration documents, and family connections that paint a picture of a woman who was definitely, authentically, documentably Jewish, and who probably would have found this entire bureaucratic panic absolutely hilarious. When I finally submit my application, it's basically a thesis on great-grandma Rivka's Jewish authenticity, complete with supporting documentation that traces her religious and cultural identity across 2 continents and 4 decades. I'm not just applying for Aliyah. I'm submitting a comprehensive biographical sketch of my great-grandmother's Jewish credentials that would qualify for academic publication. My wife looks at the finished application package and shakes her head. You've basically written your great-grandmother's Jewish biography to qualify for citizenship in a country you might not even want to live in, because politicians might change laws you weren't even thinking about 6 months ago. And she's absolutely right. But here's the thing. Now that I've gone through this entire process, I actually do want to preserve this option, not necessarily because I'm desperate to move to Israel tomorrow, but because I've learned so much about my family history and Jewish heritage in the process. I'm not just maintaining theoretical citizenship rights, I'm preserving a connection to great-grandma Rivka's Jewish legacy that I never fully understood before, though I do worry about what happens if the law changes after I've already immigrated. Will they retroactively question my great-grandmother's Jewishness? Will I need to provide updated documentation proving she's still Jewish enough? Excuse me, Mr. Cohen, we need to re-verify your great-grandmother's 1920s synagogue attendance records. There have been some policy updates. At this point, I know more about proving inherited Jewish identity than most immigration lawyers. I could teach a masterclass, Advanced Genealogical Panic, how to research your great-grandmother's religious credentials under political pressure. I've become an expert in a very niche field I never knew existed. But honestly, after successfully navigating this bureaucratic maze of inherited Jewish identity verification under political time pressure, I feel like I've earned the right to call myself Israeli eligible. I'm not just making Aliyah based on my great-grandmother's Jewishness. I'm making Aliyah with a comprehensive understanding of exactly how Jewish she was, documented and authenticated for international governmental approval. And if anyone ever questions my connection to Jewish heritage, I'll just hand them my 47-page documentation package proving great-grandma Rivka's authentic Jewish credentials. Here's everything you ever wanted to know about my great-grandmother's religious identity, researched under political pressure and compiled with the urgency of someone racing against legislative changes. Enjoy.